So we finished Unit 3, we're moving on to Unit 4, and it's the hope today that you get the basic skeleton or framework or schematic, whatever you want to call it, of the unit ahead, meaning the basic vocabulary words we're going to be slapping details onto over the next month. And the era we're talking about is called the Age of Global Revolutions, from 1750 to the beginning of World War I in 1914. And revolutions occur when people need to see change, when people fight for change, when people unify to get that change. And the four big areas: nationalism, the rise of modern countries, how did they emerge? Political revolutions, changes in politics, revolutions in politics, the Industrial Revolution, changes in industry, and people moving to cities and all that good stuff, and imperialism, the rise of these powerful nations colonizing smaller nations. And you put it all together, it's the Age of Global Revolutions. And today we're going to be using Frayer squares. And I understand these aren't everybody's favorite, and some people go, oh no, Frayer squares. But I'll explain to you my rationale to why I use those. When I was a kid, it was a very common assignment where a teacher would give you your vocab, and they'd say, here's your vocab, pull out your glossary, silently copy the definitions. I never learned diddly squat doing it that way, because it was only here in the definition. Now the definition is, you can memorize it, but if you don't understand it deeply and fully or can apply it to things, I'm going to respectfully ask, what's the point? So definition would be the standard definition. Characteristics would be descriptions. How would you describe it? Examples would be a real-life example, and non-examples would be the opposite. And again, the average human brain requires 5 repetitions to commit it to memory. Some of you are faster, some of you are slower. 5 is the average. So to take a term, you can use the definition. I'm going to use a term that's not written here, but something that's not academic, but it hopefully explains it. So I'm going to say football. Now, definition would be football is a game that's played on a 100-yard field where the object is to move an oblong ball across a line where you receive 6 points. And okay, that's a standard definition. It doesn't mean you understand football. Now, characteristics: it's played on a field. It's 100 yards. There's 11 on offense, 11 on defense. There are 2 yellow goalposts. It's a violent game. There are skill sets. Okay, characteristics describes the game. Now, examples would be the Detroit Lions, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Okay, a non-example would be the Detroit Pistons, the Sacramento Kings. Now, I'm not saying football, we need to know that, but if you understand the basic concept, that's what we're going to do with these Frayer squares. Now, here's the academic words. Number 1, during this time, constitutionalism. Nations adopt constitutions to rule the nation. Now, these are like rule books. Now, board games have rule books, sports have rule books. Rule books allow fairness. Rule books allow transparency. So America has its constitution. We are not the only nation with a constitution. You can argue it's the best or one of the best, but a constitution is essentially a rule book for running the country. And many nations during this time write these constitutions to run themselves. Concept number 2 is democracy. Now, democracy is an old term, all the way back to Athens and ancient Greece. But democracy simply means majority rules. Now, democracy works really well in small groups. It's messy for big groups. So a class of 30, it's real quick and easy. Hey, I got 2 tests. I got essay, multiple choice. What do you want? 20 want multiple choice, 10 want essay, majority rules, and that's that. So democracy works in small groups. It's much more difficult to manage in a big group, but it simply means majority rules. Inalienable rights. Inalienable rights are rights that cannot be taken away from you no matter what, even if they throw you in a prison cell, even the worst case scenario. It's like a tattoo. It's indelible. It's not going away. So, for example, as an American, you can worship any way you want, no matter what. As an American, you get due process and you get a jury trial. Even if you are a despicable school shooter, heinous crime, you still get that because it's an inalienable right. The opposite would be a privilege, like my driver's license. If I mess up, if I barrel my car into a cop car while doing bad things, they'll take my license away. That's a privilege. It's not an inalienable right. That's the opposite. Now, classical liberalism. This has nothing to do with the modern usage to say this politician's liberal versus conservative. Classical liberalism is an idea, and it's a way of governing that's based on individual freedom. freedom to buy and sell what you want, freedom to work in the job that you want to do, freedom to do your own thing as long as it doesn't infringe on others. For those who are a little more eggheady, it's the government of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment thinkers came up with ideas, and the application for government would be classical liberalism. Free markets, freedom, and I think the vision of America is to be classical liberal, whether we still are or whether we ever were. That's subject to debate. Okay. Now, nationalism, it's this belief that you are part of a bigger, broader identity. To say all of you in this room are American. Well, it's a process. You have to create that. I mean, just to graduate high school, you take 3 years of U.S. history, a year of government, a year of civics. That's 5 years to learn what it means to be an American citizen. It's not a natural process. Our natural leanings are to be our families, our neighborhoods, our schools, our cities. But to say you're part of a bigger, broader nation, this process is called nationalism. Popular sovereignty, this idea that power comes from the people, meaning people get out and vote. People are motivated and want a certain candidate or a certain policy. It will happen, but it's popular sovereignty, meaning rule, reign, okay? You know what popular means, reign. Rule comes from the people. Primarily voting is the tool to achieve popular sovereignty. If you're apathetic and you don't vote, you've lost your popular sovereignty. Now, republicanism. This has nothing to do with the Republican Party. This is democracy on a big scale. Now, you take the United States, 350 million people. You're not going to have 350 million people vote as individuals. It's just too messy. So I'll scale it down to school. If the principal wanted to get a vote, he has a choice. He could bring all 600 of us down to the auditorium and start counting. Okay, who wants choice A? Okay, 1, 2, 139. Okay, probably a little bit messy. Or he could say, all right, get on the announcement. Every first hour, choose somebody. And within the class, we say, okay, who wants choice A? Who wants choice B? Choice C? The class votes, which is democracy, but then they pick a representative. And then the principal brings every first hour representative into a room. At this point, we have 30 people in the room versus 600 people in the auditorium. That's the difference between republicanism and democracy. Republicanism is like democracy for big groups, like America. Revolution. It's this idea of getting rid of the old way and replacing it with something else. It can be politics, culture, economies, technology. Whether you have a total scrapping of the old way and something new, or whether you tweak it up or reform that. But revolution happens when people are motivated, they want change, they band together, and they fight. And it's pretty cool in history when they win. I like revolution. Now, rule of law, two-part thing. People will come and go. Laws stay the same, okay? If I get hit by a car and check out on the way to work tomorrow and they bring a new teacher in, the rules of the school are going to be the same. The class is going to be the same length, the percentage of your assessments. Even though you have a new teacher, the Clarenceville handbook will remain. People come and go, laws stay the same. And the second part of it is laws apply to everybody. You can't smoke a cigarette in the school. I can't smoke a cigarette in the school. The superintendent can't smoke a cigarette in the school. Why? It's against the law, but it applies to all people. It's a stark contrast compared to the absolutism and divine right of kings that happened during feudal times. Secularism. It's when you separate church and state. And again, going back to the old days, with divine right of kings and absolutism, they misused that religious power in ways that more enlightened people realized separating church and state's probably a healthy thing. Thomas Jefferson, our founding fathers, knew that. So we go to a public school. I don't start off class with a prayer. If you want to pray, go to church on a Sunday. We are a government function. We are a government building, and we're not going to fiddle with church. Secularism is the opposite of religious. Social contract. Now, this is a little complicated. It's when two sides give up something for mutual betterment. Let me explain this. Here we have a teacher, my colleague and friend, Mr. Lurie, talking to the students. Now, I'm sure Mr. Lurie would rather be doing some other things than doing this, but he gets paid, and that's his job. I'm sure these people would rather be doing something else, but they're getting a science graduation requirement. Now, they're sacrificing their time and effort. He's sacrificing their time and effort. They get a credit to graduate high school. He gets a job, and it's a social contract. It's mutual betterment. So as a government, as a citizen, I pay money for taxes. I go in for jury duty when I'm called. I do the things I'm supposed to do as a citizen. In return, I get protection of a military, I get a post office, I get highways. So two sides give something up for mutual betterment, social contract. Capitalism is an economic system. It's founded on competition and it's founded on movement. So you can be born in this country poor, wind up rich. You can start off rich, wind up poor. And it's essentially a way, who's going to get that money? What jobs are you going to have? What decisions are you going to make that money? There are some winners, there are some losers. Some people try to start a business and they fail. Some become big hotshots. So capitalism is very fluid, and it's an economic system based on competition and movement and get money. Get money. The opposite is communism. Now, communism is the blending of all resources. So no matter what you are, if you are the lunch lady, an accountant, a doctor, whatever, everybody gets, here's your government issued food, here's your government issued clothes, here's your government issued building. And what's insidious about communism is that it kills the desire to work. Because here's the thing, I went to college for 7 years to get my job. If I was getting the same amount of money as my high school job, why would I work so hard? And the answer is you probably wouldn't. So communism has failed throughout history, and only really Cuba and North Korea remains in the world as communist nations, because this communist experiment of the 20th century failed pretty gosh darn miserably. Now, industrialism. Industrialism is the rise of factories. And again, in my room here in Metro Detroit, I have people from Eastern and Southern Europe, people like my ancestors, my grandparents coming from Italy, to leave a rural place to work for Ford Motor Company. Some of my students have family who left the Deep South in the Great Migration of 1900 or left the Appalachian Mountains. So industrialism is goodbye farming, hello factory jobs. And that's why people move to cities like Chicago and Detroit to work those industrial jobs. In Detroit, we are the Motor City. We are founded on industrialism. Now, once workers started working in these industrial settings, a lot of times they were mistreated, so they banded together in solidarity to demand safe working conditions, adequate wages, that kind of thing. So labor unions emerge when workers unite to demand safety, to demand rights. And here in Michigan, they're pretty much dying on the vine because we became a right-to-work state. But in the 20th century, they had quite a bit of power. Urbanization is similar to industrialization, where people left rural areas and moved to cities. And living in a city is cool. I mean, there's a lot going on. There's different restaurants and nightlife and art and people, a mix of people. Downside, crowded, crime goes up, oftentimes dirty. But again, more people are gravitating to urban centers, cities at this point, and that trend has continued. In fact, about 10 years ago or so, the world population had more people in cities than in rural areas for the first time in human history. So this urbanization started then, and it's still going strong. And it emerged, or what it created, was a working class. Now, working class would be people who, they're not rich, they're not poor. Now, if you think about the old models of feudalism, a lot of people are at the bottom, peasants, and you're pretty much stuck there. Working class would be people that, they struggle, they work hard, but they make ends meet. They don't have a lot to go around, but they're living pretty well. So this working class was created during this time of industrialization and labor unions and whatnot. And it's hard to, we go to a working class school, so just look around. That's a working class area. Second to last one, imperialism. During this time, big, well-armed nations go to smaller, weaker military nations and impose their economic and social will, meaning big country showing up at little country, and we are taken over. And this went on until World War I. And it was predicated on racism, and European imperial nations showed significant racism at the time, because going back, these European nations took over people of color, the Middle East, Asia, and Africa. They didn't go after other European nations. So going full circle, wrapping up, this is the age of revolution, global revolutions, and we're going to be learning about nationalism, political revolutions, industrialism, and imperialism. And I look forward to teaching you all this. It's a very cool unit, and hopefully you got the basic terms as we move forward. So thank you for watching.